Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your week to join us today. My name's Ashley. I help with the marketing and public relations for Centurion Technologies. Centurion Technologies is a full service energy provider, and they are first in line for battery storage, solar panels, any number of technology needs for your commercial and industrial facilities. And they have strong partnerships across the world, actually, when it comes to the energy sector. So I'd really like to welcome you today and thank you for your time. Before we get going, I just want to make sure that everybody knows about some of the Zoom features. We are recording today, so you can turn your camera off if you do not wish to have your image displayed. That's in the bottom left-hand corner. Also, please make sure you are muted. I will probably mute you if there's any background noise. Additionally, if you do have questions, please feel free to use the chat feature of Zoom. It's the bottom middle of your navigation menu. Please submit any questions at any time. I would be happy to interrupt the presenter just so we can get those questions answered in a timely fashion, and or we may hold some to the end, and there will be a moment for you to ask questions that arise at that time too. Again, we are recording. Please feel free to turn your camera off if that is useful for you. And then without any other further ado, I'd like to introduce you today to Craig Kuchbaugh. He is the owner of Centurion Technologies, and he has made this whole webinar series possible. So hi, Craig. Did you want to say hello?
Yes, Ashley, thank you very much. I'd like to thank Scott Ameduri from Enerlogics for being our guest speaker today. Centurion Technologies has been in the alternative energy business for over 25 years. Our focus initially started as a lighting company and a lighting contractor. Around 2011, we decided to get into the wind energy, and we joined forces with Scott Ameduri's group to become a solar developer in the United States and Canada. We are also partners with Fuel Cell Energy and Mark Fiesel's group. We'll have presentations about that later, but today we're going to focus on the Inflation Reduction Act and how it's going to impact our energy projects and other projects here in the future. As you'll point out from the first one we did this year, as you'll see, that it has changed quite a little bit, and Scott's group has worked really hard to keep us informed about that, and quite successfully, as our solar business, energy storage, and EV charging is growing significantly. We're seeing more players in the game. We thank you for attending, and I will turn it over to Scott.
Thanks, Craig. Happy to be here, guys. Again, as Craig mentioned, we're going to do a 1 year into the Inflation Reduction Act with updates. The IRA is now a little over a year old. It passed or was signed into law in August of 2022. So we're now a year into this. A lot of the Treasury guidance was guessing at the beginning page. So when we did this about a year ago with Centurion, we were looking at likely interpretations of the guidance. Now we have more definitive guidance from Treasury on a lot of the key provisions on it, and we'll kind of walk through some of the material changes in the market overall on it. Again, kind of high level, we'll give a little bit of background of who we are at Enerlogics and sort of our viewpoint on things. Then we'll kind of dive into the IRA on two main areas. One on clean energy projects, so both the investment tax credit and the production tax credit. We'll also touch a little bit on the manufacturing tax credits that are in there, and then we'll walk through some case studies and examples as well. Again, I'm president and co-founder of Enerlogics Networks. We are a developer of projects working coast to coast. Our predominant focus is on distributed energy projects, behind the meter systems that include solar energy storage, EV charging, and the like, for clients ranging from municipal clients to K-12 schools, on into the private sector as well. So again, a good breadth of knowledge, and we're seeing and living the IRA day to day. Again, a little bit of the projects we've done, legacy of the companies out of Ohio. We've since expanded into Michigan, California, and then some projects on the East Coast as well. Kind of a level set on the presentation today. A lot of what I'm going to talk about is really focused in on behind the meter projects that sit at a facility and provide power solutions for that facility. Front of the meter projects or utility scale projects all have generally similar impacts from the IRA. There are some limitations on project size in there. From a technology perspective, again, we're going to focus mostly on solar and energy storage. Wind has similar benefits, and again, things like fuel cells, et cetera, have similar benefits as well. The kind of third main point, again, we have a lot of great Treasury guidance around all of this so far. We don't yet have definitive guidance on all areas. So what we have in here is kind of the best available information as of today, but expect that there is going to be sort of a continuing evolution of this over the next decade of the system or of the program as things evolve and further Treasury guidance comes out. Again, looking at sizing, we're squarely focused on what's on the left, on on-site solar. A lot of the provisions apply to community solar as well. Large-scale systems, utility scale, or that financial PPA column. Again, generally systems of that size have similar tax credits, tax benefits, et cetera, under the IRA, with some limitations on size and things like that as well. Again, we look at the project drivers right now. We really see three big drivers in industry. First and foremost, I think everyone's aware of inflation and electricity cost increases. Solar energy storage and other energy projects are really combating that with fixed costing for that with no fuel cost risk. Number two, we're seeing lots of sustainability drivers, whether it's ESG, whether it's carbon footprint reduction, or however it's labeled. The sustainability goals for a lot of entities are driving them to look at renewables and other clean energies. And then thirdly, the tax benefits. Again, that's why we're here today, to talk about the IRA and leveraging those tax benefits to bring project costs down. A little recap of kind of where we've been over the last really 3 years. And again, you know, the moniker is the solar coaster, but to kind of give you guys a sense of where this has been cyclical. You know, we've had a number of supply chain interruptions in the industry that have really driven a lot of headwinds for project deployment. March 2020 was the COVID lockdown. The UFLPA came into law at the end of 2021. That really had a lot of impacts on it. So a lot of materials and equipment that was made in the Uyghur region of China has now gone into a much more definitive process on it. In 2022, Customs and Border Patrol detained over 2 gigawatts of PV modules alone. So again, that's an important aspect on what's happened on the supply chain side. Further, in April of 2022, Oxen started the ADA CVD, the anti-dumping circumvention or countervailing duties investigation. There's a 2-year moratorium on that in June of last year. And then sort of this recent August was the final determinations of those companies that were affected by that ADCVD investigation. All this is to say is that, you know, over the last 3 years, we've had a lot of cyclical nature to the solar industry, where it's 1 step forward, 2 steps backwards as we, you know, get sort of clarity on one thing, and then we have you know, an issue where you know, the supply chain is interrupted from something else. Again, just some background for where we've been. As we look at sort of the solar supply chain as an example, you know, really we're kind of talking about a whole series of raw materials that go into what ultimately ends up as a PV module. We go from polysilicon to ingots to wafers to cells to modules. All of this is dominated in China right now. So the polysilicon, the wafers, the cells, and modules heavily coming out of China. Increasingly, we're seeing modules, final assembly, and other areas of Asia Pacific, as well as North America. This is a dated graphic. The percentages were 2021, but we're going to see that increase over time. And again, the process is more of the key here, is understanding all the different components that go in there. What all these tariffs have done is really driven up the cost of solar modules in the U.S. PV module pricing from, say Europe to the US. US is paying substantially more for imported modules because of all these different tariffs that are on there. They are adding, significant tariffs against it. Those all fall under different things, but the 201, the 301, the AD/CVD, et cetera, are all adding to cost. So a same module that's sold by VSUN that manufactures in Vietnam is 10-15 cents a watt less expensive in Europe as it is in the US. And that's, again, driven heavily on the tariffs. So again, the tariffs have been a historical protection to try and stimulate the US market. Those haven't necessarily stimulated the manufacturing side, again, historically. What we kind of are really seeing now are really three big drivers of clean energy, giving us a lot of tailwinds into this. And those are the American Rescue Plan, ARPA. Again, it had broad COVID-related payments that include infrastructure and energy. Personally, we've seen that come into a series of our projects in Michigan, where some of the funding for the projects is coming out of ARPA. The second big set of laws is the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, or the IIJA. That has direct investment in energy infrastructure. Again, that's also bringing now direct payments and direct investments into it through a number of different vehicles. And then the third big piece of legislation was the Inflation Reduction Act. That has both tax credits and other incentives in broad areas, including climate and energy. We're kind of diving into the IRA itself. Really there are a series of provisions and sections of the tax code that apply to renewable energies and clean energy. Again, the way the legislation was written, it's generally a renewable energy focus now. It switches to a technology neutral clean energy focus in 2025. So a lot of the language is geared on, renewables today, clean electricity tomorrow. So Section 45 and 45Y is the production tax credit. Again, that's renewables now. 2025, that's a clean electricity focus. The Section 48 is where the investment tax credit comes in for energy property. It has, again, the revisions now for domestic content bonuses, low-income communities, and energy communities. And then there's a series of manufacturing production tax credits for PV modules, subcomponents, inverters, trackers, batteries, et cetera. Those all come into play. Really, if you look at sort of the design of the IRA, it has sort of the green side, a demand side incentive, so incentivizing projects to utilize the tax credits to drive more deployment of renewables. And then kind of the blue box, it has a supply push to drive down the cost of producing those kinds of components that go into those projects in the US. The IRA also has grants for community investment, energy justice, other areas as well. All those can come into play on the grant side. And then we're seeing now a lot of the loans via the DOE Loan Programs Office, the LPO, that are driving a lot of the manufacturing side of it now, and a lot of the larger project deployments as well. We look at the Section 48 investment tax credit. Really, we're kind of talking about 5 or 6 main areas. Really, we're looking at so that first set of bullets. How do you get to the 30% investment tax credit? The provisions are, if we're less than a megawatt AC system size, you automatically qualify. If we're over a megawatt, you've got to meet some prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements. We'll talk about that a little later. There is a new tax credit for standalone storage. Anything over 5 kilowatt hours of capacity can get a 30% investment tax credit. Previously, prior to the IRA, you had to pair storage with solar or wind. Now you can actually do a standalone storage credit. There are provisions for domestic content. Again, those are another 10% investment tax credit. Really, we're looking at those saying they're going to come into play likely in 2025. We don't think there's enough domestic supply yet to get there. Again, we'll talk about that. There's bonus language in there for qualified energy communities and low-income areas. Those are each worth 10. In some of the low-income cases, another 20% tax credit. And all these tax credits are stackable. The other important part of the investment tax credits are the IRA added 2 new provisions. One is called transferability. It lets you sell that tax credit to an unrelated third party with no cost for that sale. It gives another way to monetize a tax credit for projects. There's also direct pay that enables tax-exempt facilities to receive a cash payment in lieu of that tax credit. Again, prior to the IRA, if you didn't pay federal income taxes, you couldn't take the tax credit. Now, tax-exempt facilities that include state and local governments, schools, et cetera, are able to take advantage of that direct pay. Again, kind of looking at the timeline horizon here, all these all these tax credits are in play through 2032 into 2033, and then there's sort of phase down from there on out. But we really have a 10-year horizon to do all of these or to leverage all these tax credits. Again, when we look at the tax credit side of it, the base credit technically is a 6% tax credit. You automatically get to 30% if you are under a megawatt. If you're over a megawatt, the way the language is written is actually it's a 6% plus a 24% bonus to get you to that 30% at a base level. The other bonus areas, domestic content, et cetera, are all on top of that. There is some language in there on tax-exempt bonds and what that does to a reduction in that side in the available tax credits. Again, we haven't seen the tax-exempt bonding financing come into play in a whole lot of projects yet, but we know it's coming. Again, energy storage is now eligible for its own tax credit. Again, we'll switch to a tech neutral investment tax credit in 2025. There's also production tax credits associated with that. Generally, what we see is most projects at the behind-the-meter scale take advantage of the investment tax credit. That's a one-time tax credit based on the project cost or a fair market value. Production tax credit is a tax credit based on the energy production of the system over that first 10 years of operation. Again, we see PTC as a trade-off for some of the larger utility scale projects. Rarely are we seeing projects use the PTC at a behind-the-meter scale. And again, 2025, this switches to a tech neutral credit. It won't be as specific to the certain technologies as it is today. Let's talk about the labor requirements. Again, that projects over a megawatt AC have to meet certain minimum requirements for labor. That includes both prevailing wage and apprenticeship requirements for that. And those go into play for both the construction and the initial 5 years of operation of that system under the investment tax credit side of it. Why this is important, again, Treasury guidance is preliminary on all this right now. Final guidance hasn't come out yet, but basically, we know it's going to be, backtrack. Prevailing wage is one that most construction companies are already well versed on how to comply with that. So complying with prevailing wage for all the major on-site equipment or on-site installation is generally something that most construction companies can comply with. There are some now additional reporting side of it that have to go into the prevailing wage compliance. The kind of challenging area still is the apprenticeship. So again, the approved apprenticeship programs for solar are few and far between. So what we're seeing is, more apprenticeship programs in development and in getting into practice, but we're going to have to see how that plays out over time and exactly how those registered apprenticeship programs come into play. Number one. Number two, what the availability of apprentices is under that program as well. So again, we're expecting that the apprenticeship guidance will continue to evolve as states in particular have registered apprenticeship programs and what that means to projects. I think from a practical reality standpoint, the apprenticeship is great because we're going to start using that to train the next generation of workers for clean energies. But it's going to take time to roll that out, and it's going to take time to develop that apprenticeship base. So again, expectations are apprenticeship will be a little challenging for projects to comply with in the near term. Over the longer term, we think that'll get easier. There are provisions in there that if you reach out to an apprenticeship program, you don't get qualified apprenticeships. apprentices, you don't run into those same penalties. So again, apprenticeship is important because it's going to drive the next generation of workers, but it's not going to, in the near term, probably not going to be detrimental to projects. Again, all those apprenticeship and labor requirements start at a megawatt. So projects over a megawatt have to hit that. For the ITC, for both solar and for energy storage, you've got to do that prevailing wage apprenticeship for O&M activity for 5 years. Under the PTC, you've got to do it for 10 years. Let's talk about the domestic content bonus. The domestic content bonus is an additional 10% tax credit. So under the ITC, it's a little an additional benefit under the production tax credit as well. It has sort of two sides to it. One is a steel and iron requirement. Basically, it says that 100% of the steel and iron structural products have to be produced in the U.S. The second part is a manufactured product equipment. That's currently at 40% of the manufactured equipment cost has to be of attributable U.S. content. That steps up over time to be able to get that. So ultimately, we'll be at 55% domestic content to get that domestic content bonus. Again, the reason this is important, we'll talk about a little further, is how you get and how you calculate that attributable to components that are mined, produced, or manufactured in the U.S. That's a bit of a challenge right now, given the current supply chain in the U.S., but that's going to evolve over time. For the direct pay projects, so projects that are at a nonprofit or a tax-exempt facility that are going to take that elected pay or that direct pay, you actually have to meet a domestic content minimum to get that full tax credit or that full tax value. So again, that direct pay recipients are able to get waivers for the direct pay. They aren't able to get an actual bonus for the domestic content. Again, there's a increasing requirement on that adjusted percentage of it, but basically it's at 40% for projects that start in 2024. That jumps up to 45%, then to 50, then to 55. So projects after 2026 will have to hit a 55% manufactured product adjusted percentage to be able to get that domestic content bonus. Again, why is this important? When we look at how Treasury guidance has come out on this, and again, we're a couple months old on that Treasury guidance, what different systems are categorized is important on how we go to that calculation. So as an example, if we take a utility scale PV system, the racking, the pile, or ground screw that's done, and the iron and rebar in the foundation, all those fall under the steel and iron cost. What's interesting is the tracker system would fall under a manufactured product. Same thing with the PV module and the inverter. Where this gets important is understanding how much of that is attributable to the U.S. So again, sort of the using the PV modules as an example. If I have final assembly of a PV module in the U.S., call it a Hanwha Q cells, one made in the Southeast, not all of that PV module cost is going to be U.S. content. It actually peels into what essentially the value add is of the U.S. side of it, and it's going to get difficult as we have to get these different manufacturers to kind of open up where those domestic content side of it is. Trackers, again, manufactured product that will qualify. Inverters, we don't have many U.S. inverter manufacturers yet. Those are all coming, but it is a challenge right now for anyone to achieve domestic content with traditional crystal and silicon modules. The exception to all this is for solar thin film that's made in the U.S. Will likely let a project qualify because it is U.S. made, because it doesn't have non-U.S. cells. It's a different technology. Those will likely qualify. Good luck getting an allocation, but right now that appears to be the near-term path for it. And again, First Solar's announcements and manufacturing expansions kind of bear that out. Let's pivot and talk about the energy community side of it. The energy community is a project-based bonus based on where the project's sited. It's binary. You're either in an energy community or you're not. There are kind of really three different categories of energy communities: brownfield, MSAs where you've had sort of historic fossil fuel employment, and a sensing tract adjacent to either coal mining or fossil fuel-based generating unit retirements. Again, these are a look back on it. So the MSAs with the direct deployment component means that this will change a little bit every year. We had a year ago a lot of estimates on this one. Now we have a definitive Department of Energy map of what that looks like. There's a link on screen right now. But that investment tax credit bonus for the energy communities lets you really quickly assess whether a facility is in it or not. Again, it's binary. You're either in it or not. The only thing that we're looking at now is saying, right now we've got a static map for current. Every year, as that unemployment rates are updated, we'll see an update to this map. So again, 2024 or May of 2024, we expect the 2023 unemployment information to be updated, and there'll be a slight tweaks to some of the categories of the energy community bonus. Talk about the low income communities. Low income community is an additional 10 or 20% bonus that a project could be eligible for. It is capped at a 5 megawatt AC project. So again, if you're over 5 megawatts, you can't get the low income bonus. It's really geared to do distributed energy and community solar kinds of projects. It is a 10% enter for low income community or on tribal land. 20% if it's part of a low income residential or qualified low income economic benefit project. Let's talk more about the 10% for low income community. Same applies for the tribal land as well. But again, there are capacity limitations on this right now. So the way it has been, the way the law was written, you can do up to 1.8 gigawatts of low income community bonus projects in 23 and 2024. Right now, there's not yet an allocation thereafter. You have 4 years to put that project in service from when your project has been accepted in that program. Again, it's only eligible for projects less than 5 megawatts AC. It becomes a tech neutral bonus in 2025. Storage is only eligible if it's deployed in parallel with solar or wind. So again, there's no low income bonus for standalone storage. We did a ton of investigation on that on a couple of our projects in California, and that was a very clear line in the sand on the updated Treasury guidance. Again, it's capped at 1.8 gigawatts per year. There's 4 categories of low income bonus. Those are there on the right. So low income communities, Indian land, category 1, category 2, category 3 and 4 are again really around low income residential buildings or low income economic benefit. I'm going to talk really more about category 1. Category 1, well, really all the categories, the application window opened in October 19th. Anything submitted in the first 30 days gets the same priority. Anything thereafter, only if there's available capacity. So again, we're literally sprinting on a lot of our projects to get all the low income applications submitted this week because that window closes on Saturday. Expectations are if it's oversubscribed, that there's going to be a sort of a lottery process. The DOE did publish guidance and a map. So again, map on the right with the link there on the left of the DOE map. They further subdivided those category 1, 2, 3, and 4 sides into a carve out for different size of projects. So behind the meter, with and without the additional selection criteria, and then the other eligible low income communities with and without the ASC. This additional selection criteria is designed to further incent it. So again, for 2023, at least half that capacity is reserved for those facilities that meet the additional selection criteria. Those are on ownership. So anything owned by a nonprofit gets the ownership criteria met. And then there's a geographic ASC for persistent poverty community or climate economic justice screening tool, or the CDJST energy category. Again, all that's important because as you look at projects that are doing this, having that ASC gets you a leg up over ones that don't have it. Ideally, you have one or both of those. And again, we're seeing that on projects we're submitting this week as well. Expectations on a go-forward basis is that 2024 will probably be a significant update on the process for low-income community as we get through the Treasury learning process on what's happening with this round of applications. Let's pivot a little bit, talk about direct pay. The direct pay allows essentially tax-exempt facilities to take advantage of the tax credit, even though they don't pay federal income taxes. That direct pay is again for state and local government, TVA, K through 12 schools, et cetera, nonprofits can take advantage of that direct payment. It's on a facility by facility basis, so you could take direct pay on one school and finance a different project in a different way, and not take it. But again, that election has to happen at the Treasury level on each project. So you can't just roll up 5 schools and say I want to take the direct pay on all of it. You actually got to show that on a per project basis. Ultimately, the direct pay is tied into achieving some of those domestic content minimums. Right now, there's waivers available if you can't meet that because there isn't qualified U.S. suppliers or the costs are materially higher. And again, there's a gross up of that direct payment by 6%. So any direct payment you're going to get, you get that grossed up. Direct payment applies to, again, the base 30% ITC. If that project's eligible for the qualified energy community, you can get that additional 10% tax credit. You can get direct pay for that as well. Same thing for the low income bonus. So if project's successful in getting the low income allocation, that can also be applied to the direct pay. Again, Treasuries and White House have both been publishing a lot of information, as has the Department of Energy, on direct pay and all the provisions of the IRA. But basically, direct pay has a registration process. When that project actually would receive that direct payment is based on when the project's completed, and then when that project would file, or when that owner files their tax return. So if a project's completed at the end of 2024, and they file their tax returns in June of that year, there's probably a 6-month lag before they're going to actually get the payment. Again, we haven't seen any come through yet because it's new. All this goes into play for projects that are under 2023. So but the earliest filings are going to be sometime in early 2024. So we haven't seen any direct payments been released yet by Treasury. Transferability is again a new provision of the IRA. It lets you essentially transfer those tax credits to a third party. You're able to essentially sell those tax credits off to it. It only applies to a taxable entity that owns a project, so tax exempt. They can only take direct pay on a facility basis, so you have to register projects and can do that as well. The credits can be carried forward and carried backwards. So again, that opens up some optionality for the transferability as well. Guidance on the transferability came out in June of this year. One of the keys is that you can split that tax credit against multiple buyers. So you can keep some of it internally, sell some of it off. It has to be paid for in cash. The buyer of that tax credit has the risk of adjustment or recapture risk. What that really means is that there are now, of course, insurance products designed to limit that risk. There is a pre-filing and project registration portal that's going to open later this year. Again, the intent of that registration portal is so that you don't have multiple repeat sale of the same tax credits. It's a registration process that's going to go through. Kind of bottom right box there, there is a liquid market that's developing for this. We are seeing a number of buyers and sellers and different platforms coming together to enable this. And again, right now, we're looking at tax credits trading at 85 to 90% of the ITC value, inclusive of some insurance product in there. So again, if you're $1 million project, 30% tax credit is $300,000, 90% of that would be $270,000. So we're seeing buyers paying $270,000 in cash for a $300,000 tax benefit they can take on their next tax return. And again, we're going to see that evolve over time. We'll talk a little bit more about the transferability and what it means to project structuring a little later as well. Putting all this together, what does it mean? Again, projects that go into operation sort of January 1st of this year and later, we're looking at sort of 30% tax credit under the ITC. You can stack these into domestic content, into domestic content, low income, but we're seeing 30% plus on most projects. In theory, if you hit domestic content, low income with low income benefit, you could get a 70% tax credit. Again, we know the low income is subject to an application process as well. Let's talk about the manufacturing side. So again, all the discussion we've had so far is really around the demand side push. So the incentives to projects to pull through, more and more incentives to bring down the cost of clean energy. On the manufacturing side, these are essentially supply side pushes to stimulate more and more manufacturing. I've heard a couple of podcasts recently call the IRA the biggest industrial manufacturing policy of really the last 100 plus years. It really has a ton of drivers in there for stimulating more and more onshoring of manufacturing for clean and renewable energy. The 45X section is where all this comes into. It creates a new production tax credit for qualifying clean energy components, wind, solar, et cetera. It is for eligible components that are sold before January 2030. Again, from there on out, it kind of has a phase out on there. It still looks like it's going to let you sell those tax credits off to an unrelated third party under the transferability mechanism. The Section 48C is a narrow manufacturing investment tax credit for facilities that are established in energy community areas or energy justice areas. Again, right now we haven't seen 48C come into play much, but really the bigger push is on the 45X manufacturing production tax credit. What does it really mean to projects? Again, the current PTC has a whole number of areas it covers. I'll hit a couple highlights. Solar thin film has a 4 cents a watt manufacturing production tax credit. Crystalline silicon cells have 4 cents a watt, and it gets downstream into a lot of those subcomponents in there. On the inverter side, those are again 1.5 to 2 cents a watt on a manufacturing production tax credit in particular. Sort of bottom right, talk about batteries and minerals. As we look at what those incentives are for battery supply, they come into $10 to $35 a kilowatt hour for those molecules and cells. Those tax credits for those manufacturers are material, and we're going to see it as those kind of stimulate into the market as well. What does this really mean from a manufacturing side of it? As of fall 2023, the DOE and the White House are tracking over 450 new manufacturing facilities, representing over $160 billion worth of investment announced. Again, doesn't mean they're all deployed, doesn't mean they're all going to deploy, but expectations are a vast majority of those will come into the States. It is heavily dominated on battery systems right now. We didn't talk about the EV, electric vehicle side of the market, but there are more and more drivers to have the batteries for the electric vehicles come from the US to help that vehicle be eligible for a consumer tax credit for that vehicle. So again, a lot of investments are in batteries today. Solar wafers and cell plants have been announced. Again, additional manufacturing capacity from thin film producers like for solar. They've announced a couple of new lines and new plants. A lot of the manufacturing side on the PV side include Trina, Jinko, Hanwha's got another manufacturing facility coming in. I think Maxeon's got another facility, and then we're also seeing inverter manufacturing now establishing U.S. manufacturing as well. So I think Enphase is in Indiana. Another one's coming to the U.S. So we're really seeing a lot of that stimulating new investments in new manufacturing plants in the U.S. And again, the intent is that drives down the cost by these facilities using the production tax credit to be a cost parity or lower cost than an imported product would be. Again, timeline on the bottom right, as we look at this, when these projects have been announced, and Canary Media has done a really good job reporting on this, a lot of these are going to come online really 2024 and 2025. And that's why we say domestic content bonus for our projects, which is tied to, again, these coming out of US plants, is going to take time to get there because these plants are going to take a while to kind of fully ramp up to full deployment and full production capacity. Let's talk a little bit about structuring and what all this means to a project level financing. Let's talk about tax exempt facilities. Pre-IRA, Pre-Inflation Reduction Act, tax exempt facilities could not utilize tax credits. Basically, the tax credits were stranded. Any depreciation associated with the project was stranded. Again, pre-IRA. That means that a lot of those clean energy projects were financed under third-party ownership or lease. That third-party ownership allowed an investor to take the tax credits and the depreciation to hit their return requirements, giving you a lower finance cost to that. So again, if there was no ITC and a project was going to needed a 10 cents a kilowatt hour to achieve the project returns under the third-party finance, with an investment tax credit, that might be 8.5 cents a kilowatt hour to hit those investor returns. So it's a lower PPA cost or a lower finance cost to that ultimate tax exempt facility in return for that investor taking the tax credit. What we've seen since the IRA, again, this direct pay is new for tax exempt facilities. It lets them take advantage of the tax credit and get direct payment or direct cash payment for that tax credit. The depreciation is still stranded. What we're seeing in the marketplace is tax exempt facilities that have strong balance sheets or available funding are increasingly leaning towards them owning the facilities outright versus using a third-party financing mechanism. Slide there. Yeah, should not be not. That should have been now. Let me correct that. But basically, again, this is a material driver in where we're seeing sort of project structuring come into play. On our side, we've had a couple projects that were pre-IRA going down the path of being third-party finance under a PPA. Those, in a couple of cases, pivoted to direct ownership because that, in that case, the municipality had available funding. They also had some ARPA grants that they're putting towards the projects. Again, the intent now is they're able to take advantage of direct pay and have better year one cost savings of that project. And again, we expect that to kind of continue to evolve on the financing side as more and more facilities get comfortable with direct pay and what that means to them. Again, let's talk about transferability. Transferability is a new provision. Pre-IRA, tax credits were only available to the system owner. So again, if third-party ownership lets an investor take that tax credit to hit the return requirements. Generally looked at sort of two structures of projects under that, either a partnership flip or a sale leaseback structure. It was a fairly complicated structure. It had some legal provisions around that. The partnership flip had a tax investor in there for at least a 5 or 6 year period, sometimes longer. But basically that really limited the pool of tax credit investors to large corporations and banks. I think I saw something that said, 3 of the big banks really kind of arranged 40 to 50% of the tax credit financing pre-IRA. Post-IRA, the tax credits can be sold under this transferability. Expectations are that we'll see new structuring mechanisms that will simplify transactions and also bring more tax credit investors into the marketplace. So again, the intent here, the transferability should expand the pool of buyers. Even small corporations can now kind of participate on, again, a small project basis with all of the complexity of partnership flips and sale leasebacks. So less of an education, bigger buyer pool, and that should help drive more and more tax credits into the marketplace. Again, we're seeing insurance for recapture risk to limit that buyer exposure. So again, if you make a mistake on this, the recapture risk is on the buyer of the tax credits. The insurance is designed to limit that. You can get some indemnities from the seller of that as well. And right now the market's trending at sort of 85 to 90% of the ITC value. We are seeing projects, project deals under transferability being announced. We expect to see a lot more into 2024. And again, Canary Media has a really good reporting on sort of how this looks, and then some of the different platforms that are out there, sort of arranging the buyers and sellers of this. So again, expectations are this will continue to evolve. We'll probably see some new structures come out of this. And we think small projects will kind of drive more to sort of single investor transferability with some back leverage debt against the transaction structuring as well. Talk about an example here of looking at what the IRA impact is. Again, looking at a hypothetical roughly $2 million project and looking what the cost savings look like under a couple different scenarios. Basically, if we were looking at the same project under a pre-IRA 26% ITC, the ITC was around $500,000 of that $2 million project cost. IRA brings that back up to 30%, so $618,000. If you're able to get the 40% ITC through either low income or qualified energy community, that gets you again higher and higher tax credits the more we get there. What this means from a project level, again, this is looking at cash purchase sales side of it, that brings that payback period down or brings the IRR internal rate of return up. This kind of, again, helps drive better economics for projects. So we're looking at, in this example, a 9.5-year simple payback under the 30% ITC. The additional 10% tax credit brings that payback down to a little over 8 years. Again, material drivers into the cost effectiveness of projects. We look at domestic content. Again, sort of the case study here or example is looking at that same 30% tax credit across the board, base, not looking at low income or other things. But if we assume 10% higher cost to hit domestic content, do we get there with does it make it worthwhile to get the 10% additional tax credits? And sort of the short story is yes. That higher ITC, even with higher cost, is a material driver on the return. So again, looking at the $2 million cost, if it's $2.26 million, 10% higher cost with domestic content, that additional 10% tax credit more than pays for itself. So again, this is a balance point that we expect to see as we get more and more domestic content manufacturers online. Again, our viewpoint right now in the marketplace is for solar projects, you cannot get domestic content unless you're using First Solar US made modules, which are very, very hard to get a hold of right now. Expectations are that as more and more the domestic content manufacturing comes online, including all that qualified US content, that will change. Same kind of situation in batteries. Most batteries still are coming from non-US cells. So again, expectations are as more that domestic manufacturing of cells and modules comes online, we'll see some of that come into play as well. Model details. I think that hits sort of the high levels. Just to kind of recap, so the IRA has a whole new set of tax credits for multiple technologies, solar plus storage, standalone storage, all into there. Again, it goes to a tech neutral clean energy or clean electricity tax credits in 2025. We now have initial guidance on most of the key areas. Our viewpoint is domestic content is going to be hard to get with the US suppliers right now. It's going to, as this, we'll see that come into play. Area bonuses, low income energy community, to where our projects look. Qualified energy community is a binary, you're either in or not, no caps. Low income does have caps on enrollment, and we expect that application process to play out here and see how that comes out at the end of this week. Basis of project cost can include some ancillary equipment. So putting EV charging in with solar lets you get to some additional qualified energy basis of cost. And then again, the manufacturing tax credit side, we're really not seeing the impact of that yet on equipment pricing, but we think that's going to come into play really in 2025 with expectations that as manufacturers are able to tack into the manufacturing tax credits, they're able to then sell those products into the marketplace at a little lower rate. So again, we haven't seen that, haven't felt that yet.
Hey, Scott.
All right.
Hey, Scott.
Saw a couple. Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to read one of the questions for you. Is that all right?
Yep, go ahead.
Can you summarize how a local government with a qualifying project can get up to the 70% ITC level? And when it files its tax return for direct payment, does it recover the entire ITC at once or distribute it over a period of years?
Sure. So let's start with how we get to 70%. 70% would be the 30% investment tax credit for, again, a clean electricity project. You could, again, in theory, get a 10% domestic content bonus. So that's 40%, 10% for qualified energy community. That gets you to 50%. And then the low income bonus is either 10 or 20. The only way you would be at 20% a low income bonus would be tapping into the 20% level for sort of qualified residential or qualified low income offtake. So a community solar that goes to 100% to low income areas, or a rooftop solar that goes to multifamily is how you get there. So again, 30 plus 10 plus 10 plus 20 gets you to 70%. Practical reality is it's going to be hard for projects to get domestic content for now, and it's again, it's an application process for that 20% low income that you get there. In terms of when they get that ITC, it is a one-time payment. So whenever the project is completed, the next filing that tax exempt facility would do is when they can request that direct payment. And again, we don't know exactly how long the Treasury is going to take to pay, but we think, probably a month, maybe 2 months after that filing is done. But it is a one-time payment. It's not spread out over a number of years. Steve, hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, it did. Thank you.
Sure. And again, importantly for the direct pay, no one gets the benefit of the depreciation. So depreciable basis is reduced by half of the ITC. So 30% investment tax credit, half of that is 15%. Your depreciable basis is 85%. I can take 60% for projects that achieve construction and or commercial operation in 2024. So again, all that accelerated depreciation and bonus depreciation gets stranded if you're taking direct pay. Again, as we look at the economics right now, most investors have high enough return expectations for third-party ownership that the trade-off for a tax-exempt facility generally leans towards them owning it. They have better savings under that than having a third party take the tax credits and the depreciation, just given where the interest rate market is right now and returns are for investors. Other questions? Okay. Again, just kind of, so we level set, obviously we're developing projects across the country in partnership in many cases with Centurion. We really kind of help bring this all together for you and for your clients. Again, our process is to really kind of baseline where you are, understand where a facility is at operationally and cost-wise today, and look at layering in all these different technologies against it with a cost competitive or cost optimized solution that lets you drive the most savings that we can from these clean electricity projects, as well as help you stabilize your energy cost, achieve your environmental goals as well. So again, happy to help where we can. Again, our contact info is on here. Happy to talk about any individual project needs you guys might have and how we can help.
I'm sure realistically everybody has a certain circumstance or situation. So I'm guessing the most logical next step would be to set up a one-on-one with Craig and Scott, where they could actually address your specific needs. So from here, I think I'll send out the video as well as the slides that Scott has provided today with all of this important information. I'll be sending that to everybody who registered to attend. And after that, I think utilizing your contact information to reach out and set up a one-on-one would be really beneficial.
Great. Appreciate everybody's time, and thanks for listening in today.
Thank you all for attending. We look forward to hearing from you in the future.
Yep. Thank you. A very nice presentation. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. I hope you all have a great rest of your day, rest of your week, and I hope it's productive. And again, we appreciate your time. And until next time, thank you.